Peace, y'all.
Peace to the people who be needing a bed. Love to the people who be feeling alone.
Much love.
Spreading love upon the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Hope to the people who be feeling down. Smile to the people who be wearing a frown. Faith to the people who be seeking the truth. All of the time.
This is the first video in the series, An Encounter with Sedevacantism, a Catholic crisis of faith and its resolution. My name is Kevin Rice, co-founder of the new WordPress blog, CathoLibertarian.com. I also blog occasionally at my blogspot site, The Naked Ontologist. This YouTube video is going to be embedded and playable in both posts at both sites, and if I can manage it, on my Facebook. The title of this first video is Mugged by Joe Cool. And who is Joe Cool? This dude, Joe Hargrave of Non Nobis. He is the author of a truly brilliant essay reviewing the Lockean influence on Rerum Novarum, the encyclical of Pope St. Leo XIII that formed the basis for Catholic social teaching. That was published at Inside Catholic, now Crisis Magazine. It can still be found on that site. He also used to blog at the American Catholic blog. He no longer writes for either of those blogs for reasons that will become clear very shortly. I've been an admirer of his writing for a couple of years now, ever since I first saw his work as one of the few sane and orthodox Catholic commentators at the blog Vox Nova. My wife friend requested him on Facebook, and I thought I did too, but maybe I didn't. I meant to. In any case, he responded to her request, and I was either not responded to or I must have forgotten. It doesn't matter. Whenever I go to Facebook, I inevitably find that my wife never logged out, so her page comes up. So one day, I, who was not one of Joe Hargrave's Facebook friends at the time, saw an update that's only supposed to be visible to his Facebook friends. It was visible to Teresa, my wife. And what I saw disturbed me. So I went to his blog, Non Nobis, where I saw more signs of this same disturbing and unexpected development. I left a comment on one of his posts in which I asked him whether what I suspected was true. He let me know that he preferred to discuss it off his blog through email, but he admitted candidly enough even there, and thus I was able to gather that my suspicions were correct, even before the emailing began. Joe Hargrave is a Sedevacantist. I repeat, Joe Hargrave is a Sedevacantist. Now, those who know what that is, I urge you not to jump to the conclusion that he is insane or a fool, and I will not leave comments up that are mere personal attacks on him which say otherwise. Joe is a very smart guy. He is smarter than me and very well informed. He is also a man with the courage to follow his mind and heart to the truth as he understands it, so I respect and admire him. I consider him a friend and hope he thinks the same of me, and if he does, I am honored. I like the guy. Look at him. Doesn't he just exude cool? Now, that's the only other pic of him that I'm going to use. I don't want to upset him too much with multiple violations of the ownership of his image. But I just wanted to show that one because it's one of my favorites of his Facebook photos. For the rest of the series, I'm going to use this image as a reminder of the one I just showed you. It's Snoopy as Joe Cool, smoking a butt. I added the cigarette. Yes, it's an even more egregious violation of intellectual property rights, but it's not one that is likely to be noticed by anyone who would care. Joe had some very pointed criticisms of the Pope's decision to schedule a third interfaith conference at Assisi. He also raised several very cogent criticisms of the reforms of the Second Vatican Council and the Novus Ordo liturgy of Pope Paul VI, which, over time, as I engaged them, began to seriously undermine my faith in the infallibility and indefectibility of the Catholic Church. That was not his intention, of course. He was trying to foster doubt about the, quote, conciliar church, unquote, the Novus Ordo church, the church that convened the Second Vatican Council and changed the ordinary form of the Mass, a church that he believes to be a false church. But such doubts as those he fostered, once provoked, can overturn one's whole faith. Once you start riding the doubt train, you are on a ride with no natural stops, no logical step-off points. You either take it all the way to the end of the tracks, which is an absolute disaster, or you pick an arbitrary point and jump off the doubt train before it takes you over the cliff to full-blown secularism. When Joe converted to Catholicism from communism, he was already inclined to radical traditionalism, so the only place where he could jump off from there was Sedevacantism. But Sedevacantism never seemed like a viable option to me. It never seemed more plausible than Protestantism, and I knew I had no intention to go there. Over time, the more I corresponded with Joe, the less sure I was that I could affirm a meaningful belief in the truth of the Catholic faith. It wasn't that I was starting to have a firm belief that Catholicism was false. Instead, I was losing my grip on any clear idea of what it was that I did in fact believe or could meaningfully profess my belief in. It wasn't that I was starting to believe that the doctrines of the traditional attributes of the Church Christ founded, her infallibility and indefectibility, were false doctrines. Rather, I now realized that given the information I was being exposed to and the facts I was coming to know, I no longer knew what such affirmations would mean. I would not deny the infallibility and indefectibility of the Church, but at that point, to affirm that the Catholic Church was infallible and indefectible would have been no more meaningful than affirming that the Church was brillig in the slithy toves and supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I simply had no longer had any idea what I would have been saying if I were to say that I believed those things. So my faith was all but gone, and I felt robbed, mugged by Joe Cool. When Joe was denying that the church to which I belonged was truly the Catholic Church, he used an argument that was bound to get my attention. He denied that the conciliar church was, one, holy, Catholic, or apostolic. He used the 4 marks. If one intends to deny that a certain church is the one founded by Jesus Christ, that is the way to go. For the rest of this series, I am going to deal with some of the arguments he used to undermine my confidence that the church that convened the Second Vatican Council is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. I will not be definitively refuting all of his arguments. I will be focusing mainly on the ones that I found most persuasive, the ones that almost made me an agnostic again. But first, I want to dispense with a couple of the arguments that had a great deal of surface-level plausibility, but these fall quickly when critically examined. Concerning oneness, the unity of the Catholic Church, the Church Christ founded, that has always been a unity of submission to the Roman Pontiff, the successor of Peter. Traditionally, where Peter is, there is the Catholic Church. I will be dealing with this in more detail in a future video in which I will be presenting my personal impressions of Sedevacantism rather than offering arguments as such. But for now, I will say that I am not at all impressed by Sedevacantists as exemplifying the unity of the Church Christ founded, quite apart from their rejection of Benedict XVI as a true pope. Indeed, that seems to be the only inobvious matter on which they all agree. Everything else, with perhaps the exception of the Trinity, maybe the Incarnation and the evil abortion, everything else is up for grabs and prone to cause accusations of pertinacious heresy or schism, anathemas to be hurled, or excommunications to be decreed. Concerning holiness, the favorite rhetorical hammer that Sedevacantists and other radical traditionalists like to use against the Catholic Church that convened Vatican II and submits to the Pope, is the priestly sex scandal, which is claimed to be the fruit of an evil council. That too is easily dismissed. As this screen shows, such terrible incidents had already begun and were already on the rise before Vatican II was called, and were already in decline by the time we found out about them, thanks to His Holiness Pope John Paul II. Much of the argument he used against the, quote, conciliar, unquote, church's Catholicity, I will not be dealing with. It was never my aim to either confirm or deny the soundness of all the relevant arguments, only the ones that I judged to be the most cogent. If I had confirmed these, I would not have felt much need to bother with the others. I would have been convinced. Not that Sedevacantism was true, but that at least the conciliar church was not the one Christ founded. And I would have seriously doubted that such a church could be found anywhere on earth if that had happened. I would not have needed anything else to make that decision. Conversely, if the arguments that I chose because they were the strongest and most convincing could be refuted, or at least rendered quite dubious, that would have been enough for me to doubt that any of the other Sedevacantist arguments were worth examining. The arguments that I chose, based on my correspondence with Joe, were the following. 1. That the teachings of Vatican II are irreconcilable with prior infallible Catholic tradition, so they cannot both be true. The clearest example of an outright, indisputable, in-your-face contradiction concerns the Vatican II doctrine of religious liberty found in Dignitatis Humanae, which contradicts, as Joe put it, quote, almost word for word, unquote, or as another Sedevacantist, John S. Daly, would say, all but word for word, traditional and infallibly defined Catholic teaching in the documents of Libertas and Quanta Cura, with the latter's attached syllabus of errors. 2. The forms of the Novus Ordo sacraments, such as the Eucharist and the rites of holy orders, were changed in such a way that rendered them invalid. For the latter, holy orders, priestly and episcopal orders, these are now just as invalid as Anglican ordinations, and for exactly the same reason according to prior papal teaching regarding the invalidity of Anglican orders. Now, each one of these two arguments will be dealt with separately in future videos. I'll give a little preview regarding the first one right now, the one alleging doctrinal contradiction between pre- and post-Vatican II Catholicism. As I will make clear in that future video, I approached this argument the way I was trained to critically approach allegations of contradiction in my coursework in logic as an undergraduate philosophy major. I have some experience in using this approach to evaluate problems with religious significance. I applied the same methodology to allegations of error and contradiction in the Bible, which had, many years before, convinced me that biblical inerrancy and consequently Christianity was false, which turned me into an agnostic. When I applied this method to the allegation of biblical contradiction, after reverting to my faith and taking a degree in philosophy, well, that skeptical argument collapsed. I also applied it very recently when my faith in the infallibility and indefectibility of the Church had been undermined by Joe Hargrave's arguments, and upon examining Church history, I eventually concluded that there were no clear, indisputable instances of doctrinal contradiction in the whole of Church history prior to Vatican II to support a denial of the Church's infallibility. When I applied this very same standard to the allegation of contradiction between the Vatican II document and the pre-Vatican II documents on the subject of religious liberty, the result was even clearer than it was in either of the two aforementioned issues. The allegation was revealed as worse than unsubstantiated. It was shown to be devoid of serious merit. So keep an eye out for the next video in this series and see how I came to that conclusion, which helped me to save my Catholic faith.
Faith to the people who be seeking the truth all of the time.
Sometimes
I feel like I could do anything, yeah.
Sometimes
I'm so alive.